Dr. Amanda Reynolds stared at the holographic display, watching for the third time as the U.S. Defiant executed what the Zechthraxians called a violation of fundamental physics. The human destroyer, barely a quarter the size of a Craven dreadnought, twisted through space in a way that made her crystalline captors emit frequencies of distress. "Please explain this maneuver again," Dr. Reynolds hummed, Senior Observer Chist, its crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated severe agitation. "Our calculations show the gravitational forces should have torn your vessel apart." Amanda suppressed a smile. "That's because you're calculating what should happen to a perfect ship." She gestured at the hologram, where the Defiant barrel rolled through a field of space station debris. "Human ships aren't perfect. We build them with structural weaknesses that can flex under pressure." The observation chamber filled with discordant tones as dozens of Zechthraxians processed this information. Their own ships were engineering masterpieces, each one mathematically perfect down to the atomic level. The idea of intentionally building imperfection into a design was more than alien to them. It was heretical. But the energy readings, Chist's crystalline surface clouded with confusion. "Our sensors show impossible power fluctuations during the engagement." Amanda watched as the recording reached her favorite part. The Defiant, trailing atmosphere from a damaged section, swung past a massive piece of debris. The pursuing Craven dreadnought, its AI plotting the most efficient intercept course, followed precisely, and flew straight into the atomized gas cloud the human ship had left behind. "We call that a plasma wake trap," she explained. The damaged section wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon. The hologram showed the aftermath. The Craven ship shields, calibrated for solid impacts, failing completely against the dispersed plasma. The following explosion took out two more dreadnoughts that had been following the exact same pursuit trajectory, their tactical AI unable to deviate from its calculated, perfect course in time. Chist's crystalline form vibrated in what Amanda had learned was their equivalent of a headache. "Our recording devices malfunction whenever we try to analyze your ship's energy signatures. Are you employing some form of advanced stealth technology?" Amanda thought about the U.S. Defiant's reactor core, a patchwork of repairs and jury-rigged modifications that would give any engineering eye a nervous breakdown. "Not exactly. We just improvise." The chamber's atmospheric analyzers began pinging wildly. Amanda checked her environment suit's readings. Another monitoring device had failed in her presence. The Zechthraxians were convinced humans had some kind of invisible technological superiority that interfered with their sensors. How could she explain that human technology worked precisely because it wasn't perfect? "One final question, Dr. Reynolds." Chist's voice carried the weight of genuine concern. "Our analysis suggests the Defiant's success was statistically impossible. Even accounting for your intentional imperfections, the ship had a 0.1% chance of survival. How do you explain this?" Amanda thought about the Defiant's crew, about Captain Chen who played jazz piano to help him think in combat, about Engineer Torres who claimed she could feel when the reactor was unhappy, about Navigator Williams who'd been a street racer before joining the fleet. None of them would have calculated their chances of survival. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "humans don't need something to be possible. We just need it to not be impossible." The recording reached its end, showing the Defiant limping away from 3 destroyed dreadnoughts, its hull scared but intact. As the hologram faded, Amanda noticed her observation room's lighting had begun to flicker. Another system malfunction. The Zechthraxians would spend weeks analyzing the failure, looking for signs of advanced human technology. She didn't have the heart to tell them the truth, that humanity's greatest technology was its ability to work with imperfection, to thrive in chaos, to win not despite the odds, but because they refused to acknowledge them at all. The war had only just begun, and already their most advanced allies couldn't understand how humans fought. Amanda wondered what other impossible things humanity would achieve before it was over. Lieutenant Commander Jake Martinez watched the holographic display as 12,000 civilians evacuated through the Proxima Centauri asteroid belt. Each transport ship followed a seemingly random path, their trajectories looking more like a drunken dance than a military maneuver. Perfect. Sir, his XO, Lieutenant Sarah Foster, said through gritted teeth, the Craven fleet has breached the outer defense line. Their tactical AI is projecting our position in 30 minutes. Martinez smiled, his fingers drumming a rhythm on his command chair. How many mining charges did we manage to retrieve from the colony? All of them, sir. Though I still don't understand why we needed industrial mining explosives when we have military-grade weapons. The bridge of the U.S. Normandy hummed with tension as the evacuation continued. They were disobeying direct orders from Fleet Command, who had insisted on a traditional defensive formation around the colony. But Martinez had seen the simulation results. A conventional defense would result in a 98% civilian casualty rate. Lieutenant, did you ever go fishing with your old man? Martinez asked, eyes fixed on the approaching Craven signatures. Sir, I used to fish with my dad in Montana. He taught me something interesting. Sometimes the best way to catch a fish isn't to chase it, but to make it chase you. The tactical display erupted with new warnings as the Craven fleet entered the asteroid field. Their ships moved in perfect geometric formations, their AI constantly calculating the most efficient paths through the debris. Each vessel maintained exactly the same distance from its neighbors, a dance of mathematical precision. Now, Martinez said quietly, let's give them something they can't calculate. The mining charges, hidden throughout the asteroid field, began detonating in a sequence that resembled an old Earth jazz composition. Each explosion sent fragments of mineral-rich asteroids spinning in new directions, creating a cascade of debris that defied prediction. The Craven fleet's formation began to falter. Their tactical AI, programmed to find optimal solutions, encountered a scenario where the variables changed faster than it could compute. Ships began colliding with debris, their perfect spacing becoming their undoing as they crashed into each other trying to maintain formation. Sir, Foster's voice carried a note of disbelief. Their fleet. It's tearing itself apart. Martinez watched as the mighty Craven Armada descended into chaos. Their highly networked combat systems, designed to share tactical data instantly across all ships, became a liability. As each vessel encountered unexpected debris patterns, it broadcast conflicting avoidance data to its neighbors, creating a feedback loop that overwhelmed their command and control networks. The civilian transports are clear of the field, Foster reported. But sir, Fleet Command is demanding an explanation for our actions. Martinez finally allowed himself to relax slightly. Tell them we've discovered a new form of warfare. We're not fighting their ships. We're fighting their predictability. The bridge crew watched in awe as the last Craven vessels either retreated or succumbed to the chaos of the debris field. Not a single human ship had fired a weapon, yet the enemy had lost nearly 40% of their invasion fleet. Later, during the debriefing, Martinez would struggle to explain his tactics to his superiors. How could he describe that he based his strategy on watching leaves swirl in a mountain stream? That the seemingly random detonation pattern came from his favorite Miles Davis album? The Craven Empire would spend months analyzing the battle, their best minds trying to decode the complex algorithm they assumed humans had developed. They would never understand that there was no algorithm. Just a human commander who knew that sometimes the best way to win wasn't to outfight your enemy, but to make their strengths into weaknesses. As the U.S. Normandy led the civilian convoy to safety, Martinez received a curious message. These Thraxian observers requested an urgent meeting to discuss what they termed tactical anomalies in human combat doctrine. He smiled, knowing their perfect crystalline minds were about to encounter something far more challenging than any technology: human intuition. Lieutenant Foster, he said, plot a course for the Thraxian observation post. I think it's time we taught our allies about the art of improvisation. Rock crushes scissors. Scissors cuts paper. Paper covers rock. Dr. Amanda Reynolds watched as the crystalline forms of her Dysexithraxian audience flickered with increasing distress. She had spent the last hour trying to explain this simple children's game, and their inability to compute its logic was causing what she could only describe as a collective nervous breakdown. But this is circular reasoning. Senior observer Chist's usually melodic tones had risen to an almost painful pitch. Each element is simultaneously superior and inferior. There is no optimal choice. That's the point, Amanda said, hiding her amusement as another analysis device in the room sparked and died. Humans learn from childhood that sometimes there isn't a perfect solution. We call it a zero-sum game. The chamber's atmospheric processors whined as they attempted to cope with the agitated crystalline being's electromagnetic emissions. On the main display, a live feed showed the latest human fleet engagement against the Craven Empire. Ships moved in formations that seemed to deliberately contradict every principle of advanced space combat. Impossible. A junior observer's crystalline form briefly lost cohesion. The human vessels are arranging themselves in patterns from ancient water-based naval combat. Their tactics are outdated by thousands of years. Amanda watched as the human fleet executed a perfect crossing the T maneuver, something that should have been suicidal in three-dimensional space combat. The Craven fleet, unable to compute why an enemy would use such an archaic formation, fell into disarray trying to calculate the hidden logic behind it. Primitive tactical configurations utilized in advanced void combat scenarios. Chist's voice carried the weight of genuine confusion. Our analysis suggests this should result in immediate defeat, yet the display showed the results. Another Craven retreat, their perfect formations shattered by what their tactical AI must have interpreted as tactical insanity. As if to punctuate the moment, a priority transmission cut through the chamber's chaos. This is Commander Zextal of the Craven Third Fleet, requesting immediate asylum. The message began. I must understand how humans predict battle outcomes that our quantum computers cannot. Our most advanced probability matrices, they're all wrong. Amanda thought about how to explain something humans took for granted. When a human commander makes a decision in battle, they're not just processing data. They're drawing on everything they've ever experienced. Movies they've watched, games they've played, stories they've read. We call it intuition. The chamber fell silent as the Zexithraxians attempted to process this. Their own decision-making was purely logical, based on perfect mathematical models. The idea of using cultural entertainment as tactical inspiration was beyond their comprehension. Dr. Reynolds, Chist finally spoke. Our latest analysis of human combat effectiveness suggests your species is employing some form of advanced quantum decision-making technology. Your ships move in ways that indicate access to parallel universe tactical data. Amanda couldn't help but laugh, causing 3 more monitoring devices to short out. No advanced technology, I'm afraid. Just millions of years of evolution as prey animals who had to outthink bigger predators. Humans are really good at spotting patterns, and even better at breaking them. The display showed the aftermath of the battle. Human ships were regrouping in what appeared to be a scattered mess, but was actually a complex formation based on an old Earth sports play. The Craven fleet's retreat had been so chaotic that they'd left behind valuable intelligence data. One final question. Chist's crystalline form pulsed with genuine curiosity. How can we trust any analysis of human combat doctrine when your actions defy probabilistic modeling? Amanda thought about the rock-paper-scissors game, about how it taught human children that sometimes the best strategy was to be deliberately unpredictable, about how humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to find the perfect solution, but their comfort with imperfect ones. Maybe, she suggested, you're asking the wrong question. Instead of trying to predict what we'll do, try to understand why we don't want to be predictable. As if to emphasize her point, the chamber's main computer crashed, its quantum processors overwhelmed by trying to calculate the probability matrices of the human fleet's next move. The Zexathraxians would spend weeks trying to repair it, never realizing that the very attempt to perfectly understand human tactics was what made them impossible to understand. Colonel Sarah Henderson stood on the bridge of the U.S. Pittsburgh, watching her ship's hull integrity drop to critical levels. Warning klaxons blared as another Craven energy blast carved through their starboard armor. To an outside observer, the Pittsburgh looked like a wounded animal, drifting helplessly through space. Perfect. Engineering reports hull breach on decks 4 through 7, Lieutenant Rodriguez announced, his voice steady despite the ship's violent shuddering. We're venting atmosphere exactly as planned, Colonel. Henderson allowed herself a grim smile. Send the signal to the rest of the fleet. Let's see if these aliens understand the concept of plenning possum. The Pittsburgh had been carefully chosen for this mission. An older vessel, due for decommissioning, now transformed into bait for the most ambitious trap in human military history. Her crew had spent weeks deliberately modifying the ship to appear more vulnerable than it actually was. In the observation chamber several light years away, Dr. Amanda Reynolds watched the Zexathraxians' reaction to the unfolding battle. Your vessel is critically damaged, Chest observed, its crystalline form vibrating with confusion. Yet you do not withdraw it from combat. This defies all tactical logic. Amanda watched as 3 Craven dreadnoughts moved to finish off what they perceived as easy prey. In ancient Earth history, there was something called a Trojan horse, she began, but was interrupted by alarms blaring through the chamber. The Pittsburgh's damaged sectors suddenly erupted with activity. Hidden weapon ports, disguised as hull breaches, opened fire at point-blank range. The venting atmosphere, deliberately seeded with metallic particles, conducted an electromagnetic pulse that the Craven shields weren't calibrated to stop. Impossible. Chest's surface crackled with electromagnetic distress. They deliberately weakened their vessel to create an advantage. This violates every principle of ship design. The trap wasn't finished. As the Craven ships reeled from the unexpected assault, the rest of Henderson's fleet emerged from hiding. They had used the Pittsburgh's leaking radiation signature to mask their approach, turning the ship's actual damage into sensor camouflage. The Pittsburgh Gambit, Amanda explained to the stunned aliens, works because it exploits our enemy's assumption that no species would willingly sacrifice their technological superiority. But humans understand that sometimes you have to break your toys to win the game. The battle was over in minutes. The Craven dreadnoughts, their tactical AI paralyzed by the fundamental impossibility of what it was witnessing, fell to the combined fire of Henderson's fleet. The Pittsburgh, despite its wounds, remained defiantly operational. Later, during the after-action report, Henderson received an urgent message from Craven High Command. They accused humanity of violating the laws of warfare by weaponizing inefficiency. The colonel's response was quoted in every major military academy across the galaxy. Tools exist to be used, not worshipped. The moment you forget that your ship is a tool and start treating it as a perfect machine, you've already lost. In the observation chamber, the Zexathraxians struggled to process the implications. Their own civilization had spent millennia perfecting their technology, striving for flawless efficiency. The idea that imperfection could be a tactical advantage threatened the very foundation of their military doctrine. Dr. Reynolds, Chest finally spoke, its voice carrying an unfamiliar harmonic of uncertainty. Our analysis suggests that human military technology is simultaneously more and less advanced than we believed. How can both statements be true? Amanda thought about the Pittsburgh, about how its crew had turned every weakness into a strength, every flaw into an advantage. Maybe, she suggested, true advancement isn't about eliminating imperfection. It's about learning to use everything you have, perfect or not. As if to emphasize her point, the chamber's sensors registered one final reading from the battle. The Pittsburgh's crew was celebrating their victory by playing classical music through their damaged communications array, turning even their broken speakers into a declaration of triumph. The Zixathraxians would never fully understand why the humans named this tactic after an Earth city known for its strategic use of bridges, or why Colonel Henderson insisted that the best traps were the ones that looked like mistakes. But they were beginning to learn a crucial lesson. In human warfare, nothing was ever quite what it seemed. What is this auditory assault? The Craven Fleet commander's neural interfaces, sparked as Metallica's Enter Sandman, thundered through every communication channel in their battle network. His crystalline command staff writhed in their acceleration couches, their perfectly ordered minds unable to process the deliberate chaos of human heavy metal. In the heart of the human fleet, Lieutenant Commander Martinez smiled as he watched the enemy's formation begin to waver. Time to show them why we called this Operation Symphony. His fingers tapped along with the guitar riff as he gave the order. Launch Psychological Package Beta. Across the battlefield, human ships began broadcasting different songs, each chosen for maximum disruption. AC/DC, Rammstein, Slayer. Centuries of human musical evolution weaponized against an enemy that had never conceived of using sound as anything but information. Meanwhile, in the Zixathraxian observation chamber, Dr. Amanda Reynolds laid out a deck of cards. "This is what humans call poker," she explained to the increasingly agitated Chist. "A game where the goal is to convince your opponent you have something you don't. Deliberate misinformation." Chist's crystalline form flickered with distress. "But that's inherently inefficient. Why not simply calculate the optimal?" The chamber's sensors suddenly overloaded as a new wave of human broadcasts hit the Craven Fleet. Their telepathic command network, designed for perfect clarity of thought and purpose, was drowning in what one panic-stricken commander described as weaponized madness. "In poker," Amanda continued, dealing the cards, "the player with the best hand doesn't always win. Sometimes, the player who tells the best story wins." The battle unfolding on the chamber's displays proved her point. Human ships moved in patterns that seemed random but carried hidden purpose. Some charged forward aggressively, only to retreat. Others appeared to flee, then turned to strike. The Craven tactical eye, attempting to calculate the logic behind these movements, began experiencing cascading failures. "Your vessels," Chist's voice carried harmonics of genuine fear. "They move as though they are dancing to this sonic violence." Amanda watched as Martinez's fleet executed a series of maneuvers timed perfectly to the rhythm of Master of Puppets. The Craven formation, already stressed by the psychological assault, broke completely. "Humans have always combined music and warfare," she explained, showing her cards, a mere pair of twos that had somehow won against Chist's full house. "From war drums to battle hymns, we understand that fear isn't just about physical threat. It's about uncertainty." The chamber's quantum processors struggled to analyze the battle, their calculations disrupted by the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. Human ships were using the Craven's own tight beam communications as channels for their musical assault, turning the enemy's superior technology against them. "But how can your commanders coordinate without perfect information?" Chist demanded, its crystalline surface clouding with confusion. The answer came from the battlefield itself. Martinez's voice, calm amid the chaos, echoed through the chamber. "All ships, improvise with the beat. You know the melody. Make your own harmony." The human fleet moved like a jazz ensemble, each ship finding its own path while maintaining the overall rhythm of battle. The Craven Fleet, unable to predict or understand these movements, began firing blindly, their perfect coordination shattered by what their tactical computers labeled as tactical noise cancer. In the aftermath, as the defeated Craven ships retreated in disarray, the Zixathraxian observers gathered to analyze what they had witnessed. Their conclusions would send shockwaves through the galactic military community. Human warfare transcends traditional combat paradigms. They have weaponized uncertainty itself, turning chaos into a strategic asset. Most disturbing of all, they appear to be enjoying it. Amanda gathered up the cards, hiding her smile as another monitoring device shorted out. The Zexathraxians would spend months trying to develop countermeasures against human music, never understanding that it wasn't the sound itself that defeated the Cravens. It was the very human idea that disorder could be a weapon more powerful than any perfect formation. In the distance, she could still hear the faint echoes of victory, the sound of humanity's battle hymns, carried through space on the enemy's own communications beams, a reminder that sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy never imagined could exist. Commander Martinez stood before 500 ship captains in the U.S. Normandy's holographic briefing chamber, holding up a sealed envelope. The room hummed with anticipation and confusion. None of them had ever seen paper orders before. Operation Sandstorm begins in 6 hours, he announced. Inside these envelopes are your individual objectives. Once opened, all digital communications will cease. We'll be running silent, conducting the largest coordinated fleet action in human history, without coordination. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Captain Sarah Chen of the U.S. Beethoven raised her hand. "Sir, with respect, how can we coordinate without communicating?" Martinez smiled, pressing a button that filled the chamber with the sound of John Coltrane's Giant Steps. The complex jazz composition swirled around them, each instrument following its own path while maintaining the overall harmony. "Like this," he said. "Each musician knows the key, the tempo, and the destination. Everything else is improvisation." Meanwhile, in the Zexathraxian observation chamber, Dr. Amanda Reynolds was attempting to explain this unprecedented strategy. "You mean to tell us, Chist's crystalline form pulsed with agitation, that your ships will operate without a central command structure, without real-time tactical updates. This violates every principle of fleet operations. Have you ever watched a flock of birds?" Amanda asked, pulling up historical footage of starlings creating complex patterns in Earth's skies. No central control, no direct communication, yet perfect coordination. The chamber's sensors struggled to process what happened next. 500 human vessels, split into smaller groups, began moving into what appeared to be random positions throughout the Proxima Centauri system. The Craven fleet, largest ever assembled, watched in confusion as their enemies seemed to scatter without purpose. Then the sealed orders were opened. Each human captain had received a different piece of a massive tactical puzzle. Like jazz musicians who know the key but not the exact notes, they began to move. Ships that appeared to be retreating were actually flanking. Apparent stragglers were positioning themselves for ambush. The Craven tactical eye, attempting to predict the human strategy, encountered a fundamental problem. There was no strategy to predict. Each human ship operated independently, following basic guidelines while adapting to local conditions. Impossible. A junior observer's crystalline form briefly destabilized. Their movements, they follow no logical pattern, yet somehow, the trap closed like a symphony reaching its crescendo. Human ships emerged from seemingly random positions, their apparently chaotic movements revealing themselves as a perfect encirclement. The Craven fleet found itself surrounded on all sides, including vectors their tactical computers had deemed strategically irrelevant. Martinez's voice, breaking radio silence for the first time in hours, carried a hint of satisfaction. Like jazz, warfare isn't about playing what's expected. It's about playing what fits the moment. The Craven fleet's attempts to break out of the encirclement only made things worse. Each human ship responded independently to local threats, making it impossible for the enemy to find a single weak point in the formation. It was like trying to punch through a swarm of bees. The very flexibility of the human fleet made it unbreakable. In the observation chamber, the Zexathraxians watched in stunned silence as the largest Craven fleet in history was systematically dismantled by what their analysts could only describe as tactical anarchy. Dr. Reynolds, Chest finally spoke. "Our systems indicate that such coordination without communication should be impossible. Yet we are witnessing the power of shared context," Amanda finished. "Each captain knows the mission's spirit, not just its letters. They don't need constant updates because they trust each other to improvise appropriately. The chamber's quantum processors finally overloaded trying to calculate the probability matrices of the human fleet's movements. As technicians rushed to repair them, Amanda reflected on how humanity's greatest military innovation wasn't technology, it was trust. Trust in chaos. Trust in improvisation. Trust that 500 individuals, given the same sheet music but different instruments, could create something more powerful than any perfect formation. The Battle of Proxima Centauri would be studied for centuries, though never fully understood by alien strategists. How could they understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their ability to follow a plan, but in their shared ability to deviate from it at exactly the right moment? First Officer Kovacs of the Craven Dreadnought Eternal Logic stared at his meditation crystal, trying to purge the disturbing thoughts from his mind. The ship's AI had flagged him for psychological evaluation after he'd suggested intuitive course corrections during their last engagement. The human way of war spreads like a cognitive infection, his superior had warned. But Kovacs couldn't forget what he'd seen. A human destroyer evading certain death by executing a maneuver based on something called a basketball pivot. Across the Craven fleet, similar reports were mounting. Young officers began questioning the centralized commands. Gunners started leading their targets based on gut feelings. Engine crews reported making unauthorized modifications to achieve what they called better feel. In the Zexathraxian observation chamber, Dr. Amanda Reynolds watched the unprecedented breakdown of the Craven military hierarchy with a mixture of amusement and fascination. Your species has engineered a mimetic weapon, just accused, its crystalline form flickering with agitation. These ideas, they spread without direct transmission. We call it inspiration, Amanda replied, setting up a chessboard. Watch this. I'm going to play against your tactical computer, but I won't use any standard openings. The chamber's quantum processors hummed as the AI began calculating optimal responses. Amanda's first move made no strategic sense, sacrificing a knight for no apparent advantage. The computer's evaluation protocols crashed trying to understand the logic. Meanwhile, aboard the Eternal Logic, Kovacs made a decision that would change the course of the war. During a skirmish with human forces, he overrode the ship's AI and ordered a maneuver based on watching human sports recordings. A feint within a feint within a feint. It worked. Sir, his weapons officer reported, voice trembling with something dangerously close to excitement. The humans are sending us a transmission. They're applauding. The infection spread faster after that. Craven ships began displaying what their high command termed tactical irregularities. Crew members requested access to human cultural databases, claiming they needed to understand the enemy. Combat formations started showing organic variations that no eye could predict. Your species has weaponized evolution itself, just observed as reports flooded in of Craven ships adopting human-style command structures. They see your apparent chaos, and instead of rejecting it, they recognize its power. Amanda finished, checkmating the AI with a sacrifice play it had dismissed as illogical. Humans don't just adapt. We teach others to adapt. The Craven High Command's response was swift and desperate. They ordered all ships to purge their cultural databases, to restrict their crews to purely logical decision-making protocols. But it was too late. The idea of intuition, once introduced, couldn't be unlearned. Kovacs and his fellow infected officers were branded as compromised, but their success rates couldn't be ignored. In battle after battle, ships that embraced human tactical flexibility consistently outperformed their rigidly logical counterparts. The final stage of defeat, Amanda explained to the horrified Zexthraxians, isn't when your enemy destroys you. It's when they make you question everything you thought you knew about warfare. The chamber's displays showed the latest battle statistics. Craven ships under hybrid command structures were showing a 300% increase in combat effectiveness. The very unpredictability that their tactical doctrine had deemed a weakness was becoming their greatest strength. It's like a plague, a senior Craven strategist lamented in an intercepted transmission. We built perfect weapons, perfect ships, perfect tactics, and the humans showed us that perfection itself was our vulnerability. Kovacs, now branded a renegade along with dozens of other infected officers, sent one final message before leading his battle group into human space. We don't seek to defeat humanity. We seek to learn from them. Perfect logic created perfect weakness. Perhaps embracing imperfection will make us strong. In the observation chamber, as another analysis device shorted out trying to predict human behavior patterns, Amanda reflected on humanity's true superpower, not the ability to think outside the box, but the ability to show others that the box never existed in the first place. The human virus of tactical creativity had found fertile ground in the most unexpected place, the minds of their enemies. And like all good ideas, once it took root, it was impossible to contain. The Battle of Alpha Centauri began with a football play. Blue 42. Blue 42. Hut, hut, Heike. Commander Martinez's voice rang through the command channel as 500 human ships executed a formation that hadn't been seen since the Super Bowl of 2036. The U.S. Normandy led the charge, breaking through the Craven line like a quarterback on a blitz. In the Zexithraxian observation chamber, Dr. Amanda Reynolds watched as the galaxy's most advanced tactical AI experienced what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. They're using entertainment as military doctrine, Chest whispered, its crystalline form vibrating with a mixture of horror and awe. The formations, they're based on human recreational activities. Look closer, Amanda suggested, pointing to a group of marine dropships executing what appeared to be synchronized breakdancing moves to avoid enemy fire. Colonel Henderson discovered that the fluid movements of street dance create unpredictable vector changes. The Craven targeting systems can't track it. The chamber's displays showed the full scope of human tactical insanity unleashed. Ships moved in patterns borrowed from everything from ballet to skateboarding. Marine squads in powered armor performed zero-G capoeira between enemy vessels. The U.S. Pittsburgh, still bearing its battle scars, led a formation based on an ancient TikTok dance challenge. The Craven fleet's tactical network crashed, then rebooted, then crashed again. This isn't combat. A Craven admiral transmitted before his neural interfaces overloaded. This is performance art with weapons. He wasn't wrong. The human fleet had turned warfare into a deadly choreography, each ship adding its own style to the deadly dance. The infected Craven ships under Kovacs joined in, their crews abandoning perfect geometry for what they called tactical jazz. Your species, just observed as another display exploded from calculation overflow, has evolved beyond mere adaptation. You've turned evolution itself into a weapon. Amanda watched as Martinez's fleet executed a maneuver that combined elements of a quarterback sneak with a ballet pirouette. Humans never stopped evolving, she explained. We just learned to embrace the chaos of change instead of fighting it. The Craven's last attempt at resistance came in the form of their ultimate weapon, a tactical AI that could process 1 billion scenarios per second. It lasted exactly 3 minutes before suffering a complete logic failure trying to predict a formation based on breakdance fighting. The surrender, when it came, was unprecedented. The Craven admiral requested the terms be written on paper, having finally understood that some things couldn't be trusted to perfect digital transmission. In the aftermath, as human ships performed victory rolls that looked suspiciously like dance moves, the Zexithraxian Council convened an emergency session. Their conclusion would reshape galactic military doctrine forever. Human warfare represents a strategic singularity, a phenomenon that becomes more complex the more you try to understand it. Their greatest victory lies not in defeating their enemies, but in teaching them to evolve. The final battle report, authored jointly by Dr. Reynolds and Commander Martinez, consisted of a single sentence. The perfect is the enemy of the good, but the unpredictable is the ally of the brave. As the chamber's last functioning display showed human and infected Craven ships performing the joint victory formation based on the Macarena, Chess turned to Amanda with what she had learned to recognize as resigned acceptance. We still cannot predict human military actions, the crystalline being admitted. Yet somehow, this very unpredictability has become the most predictable thing about your species. Amanda smiled as she watched Martinez's fleet spelling out GGEZ in space using formation flying techniques borrowed from the Blue Angels. Maybe that's the point, she suggested. The moment you think you understand human warfare is the moment you've lost to it. Across the galaxy, military academies scrambled to update their doctrines. Some tried to categorize and systematize human tactics, missing the point entirely. The smarter ones simply added a new course, the art of tactical evolution, learning to dance with chaos. The war was over, but humanity's gift to the galaxy was just beginning. The understanding that true strength lies not in achieving perfection, but in never stopping the dance of evolution. Even if that dance happened to be the Macarena. In space, with weapons.